So here's how to buy a clean used car in Gainesville, Florida. You do not have to drive to Jacksonville or Orlando or all over the place. Go looking at cars that, you get there and they're not even described, the way that they are. There's issues that are undisclosed, and that happens so often. There are some things you can do when you're looking for a used car to make sure that you're getting a good car. The first thing you need to do is do your research. There's a lot of cars, right? You want to know as much information as you can know about the car that you're going to go look at, some potential pitfalls, what kind of maintenance you're going to have to do on it. I want to know what are the known issues that that particular car has and that model for that year. Because it's different for a 2015 than it is for a 2020. Things change. Another thing that I'm going to want to do is I go straight to my CARFAX. That is my biggest tool. CARFAX tells me maintenance records, accidents, how many owners, where was it from? Is it from up north? Is there rust issues? I want to know the maintenance more than anything. Condition is everything on a used car. And maintenance is what tells me if it's been taken care of, right? Condition is everything. So go through the CARFAX, look for the maintenance records. If there's not a lot of maintenance records, that doesn't really mean it's a bad car, but what it could mean is that the person that owned it did a lot of the maintenance on their own. Not necessarily a bad thing, but definitely a question you could ask the seller, whether they're a private individual or, somebody as a dealer who maybe has some records. Maintenance is everything. Condition is everything on a car. You could take the same car and not take care of it, and it's a piece of junk. Or you have the same exact car that was well taken care of, all the maintenance was done on it, everything's perfect, you're not gonna have any issues with it, right? So maintenance is extremely important. Accidents are very important. You don't want to buy anything with major accidents, frame damage, structural damage. I would stay away from those kind of things. And another thing is I see a lot of dealers that don't even use CARFAX. If they're a dealer and they don't have a CARFAX for you, that's kind of a red flag. That means they're buying their cars without getting a CARFAX and they're not doing their research and they don't know anything about the cars. So those things, immediately I want to know. The CARFAX is my biggest tool to tell me that. And it's your biggest tool as a consumer to be able to know more about the car, right? Start with that. If the CARFAX doesn't look good, move on. Go to another car, find something else. It's pretty clear. It's pretty easy to tell. You see odometer fraud, frame damage, multiple owners, up north, whatever, so many different things, airbags deployed. Those things immediately turn me off. I just move on to the next car. If you're gonna buy a car and you don't know a lot about cars, I highly suggest a pre-purchase inspection. You can find a local shop, any reputable mechanic shop. They'll do a pre-purchase inspection somewhere between $100, $125, maybe $150. I know even you can take it to the franchise dealerships. They'll charge you somewhere around $185, maybe $200 for a pre-purchase inspection. But there's a little pitfall on that one. The biggest one that I have with the franchise dealers is what they do is they'll kind of pick apart parts sometimes, and then they'll try to flip you over onto one that they have on their lot, which is, I highly recommend getting a pre-purchase inspection. You absolutely need to do that if you don't know a lot about cars. If you feel confident about cars, you've been buying cars your whole life, you're a car person, or maybe you do your own maintenance on them yourself. There's a lot of free checklists that you can go online and you can get and print out. There's some really good ones. We're gonna drop a link in the description in here. You print it out, it basically, that way you don't miss anything, and you just follow it all the way through. You're gonna check everything, the oil, the transmission fluid, brake fluids, all of your fluids. It's easy to miss something when you're checking a car, you're trying to negotiate and you're at the dealership and there's a lot going on. So just bringing a checklist with you, if you're gonna check it yourself, helps a lot, right? So I highly recommend that. I see it every day. I see people buying cars that they don't run the CARFAX on, and then they check it later and they find out there's odometer fraud and the miles have been rolled back, or it's got frame damage, or it's been in a major accident where the airbags were deployed, and those things really impact the value of the car, and they hurt it in a negative way. And some service records, that impacts the car in a positive way, right? If it's a one owner with all the service done, that's gonna be more valuable, Sometimes a good deal is not really a good deal if you gotta spend thousands and thousands of dollars on it after you bought it because you didn't do your research. So, research, CARFAX, pre-purchase inspection. If you're gonna do your own inspection, have a checklist ready. And then I'm kind of going to go over that with you, like kind of how I would use that checklist if I were buying a car, either as a dealer at auction or just a consumer. That checklist is super important. And then the one last thing that I really want to hit on, because they're super cheap, is you can go on Amazon and get a cheap scanner, you know, that can read engine codes, right? Like I have a really good one here. It's connected to my phone. It gives me pretty much live data on everything. And you can download software for pretty much any vehicle, especially if you're not going to pay for that pre-purchase inspection. You can get a $35 scanner that's going to read the check engine lights. And even though the check engine light might not be on in the car when you're there, that doesn't mean the code wasn't cleared. And those codes will be stored in the computer, right? It's still there. So the light might not be on, but it still could have codes in there. So you got your checklist, you did your research, you know, you've already bought CARFAXs, but what do you do with it, right? Okay, so you need the VIN number, first of all. There's multiple places on a car where the VIN number is, you know, it's always gonna be right up here on the windshield. So that's one spot to find it. A lot of times they'll be on the window itself, depends on the make, but you can also find it inside of the door, right here. And then on other vehicles, it'll be on the outside of the door, somewhere in here. Those are the main ones that you want to look for. It's very easy. It has barcode. You can scan it. You can type it into your whatever for your CARFAX, but you know, run the CARFAX, right? That's going to tell you everything you need to know. It's like this car we bought at auction. This car has brand new Michelin tires. Always a good sign that the car was taken care of, right? You know, I mean, no one puts $1,500 Michelin tires on a vehicle and doesn't take care of the other maintenance on it. Another one that's kind of weird that I've noticed just over the years is a trend, and maybe I'm crazy, but is windshield wipers. Every car that I've ever had that had brand new windshield wipers was a really, really good car. I don't know why, it might just be me. But anyways, you know, you're gonna wanna open up the engine, right? You just check your fluids. This is a 2018 with 126,000 miles on it, right? Look inside this car, all right? I mean, look at the seats. Look at how well maintained this car is. Yeah. You know, that's a really good indicator the car was maintained. Maintenance on a Lexus, I mean, Lexus will last forever. But, you know, if you don't know where to open up the engine bay, it's always usually underneath somewhere on the car, underneath the steering wheel. So just look for that. You can pop it open. You know, at least check your basics, right? So I want to see the oil 100%. Some of the things that I'm looking for on oil is, was it just recently changed? And I've actually lost customers over the years because I changed the oil on a car thinking that was going to help me, right? Because it had dirty oil. And it actually can scare people off because you can tell a lot about used oil, about the condition of the car. You know, you can see dirt, metal shavings, you can see water, you know, if it has a coolant leak. So I really like to see old oil, or like, you know, 50-50 oil, you know, but brand new oil, it raises a question of why did they change it? And that also goes into, you know, further in with the transmission fluid is a big one. If you see that on the CARFAX or it's brand new and it's just been changed, usually people are trying to save the transmission, and that's their last hope at, you know, getting it to not need to be replaced. And a lot of times it's just too late, you know. So be careful with brand new transmission fluid. A lot of the new cars now, like, you're not going to be able to check the transmission fluid. Most of them have sealed transmission fluid, but you can check your oil, you know, and you just find your dipstick, you know, and what you're looking for. You just want to see that it's right where it should be. You know, this oil's not brand new, but it's probably got 1,000 miles on it, right? And it looks clean, really clean. Some cars are a little easier to check things on than others, you know, like we have our brake fluid up here at the top. That's another thing that you can always check. Transmission fluid, we're not going to be able to do on this one. You know, coolant as well. So we're going to pop open a hood on another car to kind of show you a few more things on those. Check all of your fluids, you know. Again, that's why you want that checklist, right? Because I'm looking at all this stuff going on, and even me, after all these years, I'm going like, all right, well, where's this and where's that? And it can get a little confusing. So you want that checklist if you're doing this yourself. Now, you know, again, you got a mechanic that's going to do all this for you. Better yet, I like to check all of the, you know, obviously the headlights, blinkers, front blinkers, side view mirrors, you know, your brake lights, and I'm also looking for, damage, right? I'm looking for noticeable paint work. Another thing about CARFAX I will mention is that, it doesn't always show an accident. If somebody pays out of pocket for an accident, it's not going to show up on the CARFAX report. So, you want to look for, certain things in the paint that are kind of a dead giveaway. You just kind of go give a full walk around on each vehicle, just go over it all, like in the exterior, interior, all of it. All right, so yeah, this is a better example. Most of the new cars have engine covers that cover up everything, but checking the coolant, you want to make sure it has the right color coolant. These cars now, they're designed to have additives in the coolant, and you don't want to mix coolant. That's not a good thing. It can gel up. It's not a good thing. So the color of the coolant, each car has a different color. Lexus, Toyota is like pink, Honda is blue. It goes on and on. You can do your research on that. But on this car, we can see that the coolant levels are where they should be. Again, this one's got a brand new battery, which is a good sign. This is a little bit easier to get to the brake fluid on this one. So brake fluid's kind of a little bit more hard to see because sometimes it gets a little too white, and maybe, but it does have an indicator, right? So there, if you feel with your fingers, it says full when hot, and it says max and low. You just want to make sure it's in that range. That's usually, it's not something that you're going to have an issue with. Brake fluid is not something that you see a lot of times. It's a leak. It's oil. The coolant is the biggest one. Out of all the years I've been in this business, like every car that I've ever had blow up on me coming from the auction, driving it home, is because it ran out of coolant, because maybe the water pump was bad or it had a leak somewhere and it ran hot, had to put an engine in it. Like, it hurts, man. So like the coolant's super important. It's not a bad idea if you're able and capable to climb underneath the vehicle, look for oil leaks, any kind of leaks on the transmission, to avoid being scammed and driving all over the place and having such a difficult time. And honestly, this is the most difficult car market that we've ever seen, at least in my 15 years. Supply is extremely low, prices are high, quality is even worse. So, if you want to make it a little easier on yourself, do your research ahead of time, have your checklist, have a mechanic lined up if it is out of town, find a reputable one that can check the car for you. We're going to add that checklist in the description here, so you guys can, take a look at that and print it out and take it with you. Comment below if this helped you purchase your next vehicle. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about in the next couple of episodes about, CARFAX, odometer fraud, and it's kind of some of the things that we're seeing right now in the industry that is just really, really rampant.